Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Monday, December the 7th, 2020. I'm going to start talking about the night the pipes went out in Georgia. But before we get to that, let's take a look at the panic report. 33 million locked down in California. Backlash. Yeah, who saw that coming? Huh? Gallup, mental health new low. Giuliani infected, hospitalized, was traveling across country maskless. Biden's move complicated by COVID. Pfizer, Moderna decline invitations to White House vaccine summit. Navajo Nation, second wave, much more dire and much more severe. Fauci warns Christmas may top Thanksgiving. I'll have more on that later. UN's advice for holidays: don't hug. No more outdoor gatherings of any kind under new Bay Area orders. States scramble to curb without national leadership. But what about the national leadership of the office of the president-elect? States scramble to curb without national leadership again. Yes, New York City sends mask squad to enforce rules in lax counties. Survey, 55% of firefighters will not take jab. New Jersey, rate of non-cooperation with contact tracers now up to whopping 74% of cases. God bless the people of New Jersey. The good Lord's in control. Hundreds attend North Carolina Christmas parade despite warning. A bit early, isn't it, for a Christmas parade? Let's go to Jim Kunstler. His column this morning, A Resolving Picture. Much as Chief Justice John Roberts would like to be the finger down the deep state's throat to trigger the upchucking of Mr. Trump from the nation's gullet, it looks like he won't get his chance in the new 6-3 disposition of the U.S. Supreme Court. So far, it is Justice Samuel Alito in the lead, preparing a landing zone for the president's case against the state of Pennsylvania in its shabby-ass attempt to stuff its ballot boxes with iffy mail-in votes. I believe that case is going to be heard, and Justice Roberts' position will be moot. The problem over in Pennsylvania is that its Act 77 bill, passed before the election by the state legislature to expand absentee balloting, i.e. mail-in voting, did not comply with the Pennsylvania state constitution and required a constitutional amendment, which never happened. Could be pretty cut and dried. Well, the SCOTUS is thought to be reluctant to intervene in state constitutional issues. A case involving federal elections may prove an exception. And then there are other issues with the states of Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. A lot of electoral votes there. The virtual takeover of U.S. elections by the Dominion Vote Tabulation Company was a stealth operation, probably enabled by the connivance of scores of elected officials at both the federal and state levels, senators, congressmen, governors, and on down. It's going on for years due to the secrecy of the op and the complacency of the public, with little help from the Democratic Party's friends in the news media. Did money change hands? Potential criminal violations abound. What on earth was Canada-based Dominion with its grotty Smartmatic software connected to Venezuela and to George Soros's would-be world-changing Open Society Foundation, and very possibly to China's ruling party, doing in charge of counting our votes, perhaps serving something other than America's national interest? We will soon find out in a way that will make a lot of heads explode. An awful lot has been churning in the deep background for months before the election. Trump was onto the mass write-in vote scam enabled by the media-assisted hysteria over COVID-19. The wheels of genuine U.S. intel against national security threats still turned in spite of whatever deep state perfidy had been aimed at Trump himself from day one in office, and the president made use of his own private counter-intel hackers to suss out the game, which was finally to overthrow him by ballot fraud. The result was Executive Order 13848, issued in September 2020, which specified foreign interference in elections as, quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to national security, unquote, and laid out some pretty stringent remedies. The main one was a requirement for the top executive agencies, DOJ, DOD, Homeland Security, Treasury, plus the Director of National Intelligence, to deliver an assessment within 45 days of the election. We're now in the sweet spot of that 45-day delivery period when something has to pop. Looks a little like the Attorney General, Mr. Barr, has been dithering and wriggling painfully over this and even making noises about resigning. But he may have already surrendered his credibility with the foot-dragging of the FBI under Christopher Wray and the agency's apparent lack of interest in election fraud. The consequences of EO 13848 will roll out with him or without him. The real action was at the Department of Defense, where the president hastily cleaned house this fall and installed the trustworthy Christopher Miller as Secretary of Defense, along with top aide Kash Patel and Ezra Cohen-Watnick as acting Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Cohen-Watnick had been an assistant to General Michael Flynn, former Director of Defense Intelligence, in his brief tenure as National Security Advisor before getting sandbagged by Barack Obama and James Comey. Both Cohen-Watnick and General Flynn are intimately involved with the apparatus of defense intelligence, of course, and have been actively using it to identify DNC and Joe Biden activists who played a role in election irregularities as well as foreign actors. This wasn't any Russiagate type bullshit, it was the real deal. EO 13848 includes this provision, unquote. The report shall identify any material issues of fact with respect to these matters that the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security are unable to evaluate or reach agreement on at the time the report is submitted. The report shall also include updates and recommendations, when appropriate, regarding remedial actions to be taken by the United States government other than the sanctions described in sections 2 and 3 of this order, unquote. The remedial actions are interesting. They include pretty severe sanctions against any persons, entity, or company involved in or enabling foreign interference in elections, attaching property in the U.S., blocking trade, and an array of financial restrictions and penalties. The EO does not spell out criminal penalties that might fall under the sedition and treason statutes, but expect these to be activated as the law provides. Quite a few political celebrities and figures in the news and social media may have exposed themselves to liability in this. If it doesn't mean the end of Facebook or Twitter, it may spell the end of Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey running them. Also include the less well-known execs at the Washington Post, the New York Times, and several cable news networks. Eventually, Trump will have to personally deliver the bad news to Joe Biden that he and Dr. Jill won't be attending the inaugural ball on January 20th live or on Zoom. Sounds too wild to be true. Well, stand by on it. We will soon know long enough. I was wondering when the media, the mainstream media, was going to get around to actually dealing with the meat of the accusations regarding the stolen election. Well, we have a piece by Calvin Woodward yesterday, which I can only describe as pissy and furious. President Donald Trump flooded his first post-election political rally with debunked conspiracy theories and audacious falsehoods as he claimed victory in an election he decisively lost. A sampling from his remarks in Valdosta, Georgia. Trump, if I lost, I'd be a very gracious loser. The facts. There's no if. He lost, refuses to concede, hasn't congratulated the winner, and persists in allegations of election malfeasance that courts and officials across the breadth of battleground states and in Washington have found meritless. Trump suggesting ballots were found in nefarious places. Quote, when the numbers come out of the ceilings and out of the leather bags, you start to say, what's going on? The facts, nothing of the ordinary was going on. This remark was the latest iteration of a false claim that he has spread around about ballot-stuffed suitcases found under a cloth-covered table and tallied without supervision. A video distributed on social media and shared by Trump featured surveillance footage of ballot processing on election night in Atlanta. It showed regular ballot containers on wheels, not suitcases, and both a state investigator and an independent monitor observing countings of those ballots until the job was done for the night. state and county officials said courts and election officials in battleground states across the country have systematically shot down Trump's persistent accusations that the election was rife with fraud. Trump on the now settled presidential contest. We're winning this election. The facts, no, it's over. And Biden defeated him. When California certified his presidential election Friday, that put Biden over the top in the Electoral College, pushing his certified electoral vote total past the threshold of 270 needed to become president. He reached 279 electoral votes, and is on track to finish with 306 to Trump's 232 once more states certify the results. The electors will meet December 14th in their states to make the national result formal. Trump, we won Georgia, just so you understand the facts. No, he didn't. Trump lost Georgia in the election. The state has certified for Biden. Republican election officials have affirmed the election was conducted and counted fairly. No credible claims of fraud or systematic errors have been made. An audit was initiated by Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, and that triggered a full hand recount that confirmed Biden's victory in Georgia. Governor Brian Kemp, also a Republican, refused Trump's request Saturday to call a special legislative session to try to subvert the outcome. Oh, these people are in for a very nasty surprise. Let's take a look at the chat. Hello to Palcazo88, to Professor Paul. Chocokin666, if you dance with the devil, don't sing like an angel when he calls for his due. Dan Allison, all the Christ haters foaming at the mouth at the opportunity to abolish Christmas. I'm going to be talking about that a little later. How are we doing here? Is that any better? Time from the catacomb churches, says Yo Mama. Well, there is some resistance out there, and an American archbishop has actually spoken up to say that devout Catholic Joe Biden, we know that he has a particular fondness for the palms, should not be able to receive communion. Chogokin666, 0 firemen wear masks, at least Fire Department of New York. Okay. Luke Ford doesn't seem to be streaming anymore. Says bisexual incel with the logos. I don't know about that. I haven't kept up. Okay, it's the same person again and again and again and again and again and again. Okay, Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator, explains Luke moved to DLive for streaming. And Yo Mama says, whenever you want to present your fantasies as news, just cite sources. Okay, Chad Chadson again. Yes, Luke Ford is streaming now. Okay. Dan Allison says, Scottus will find the election goes to Trump. It's a little more complicated than that, I think. They could throw out the elections from Pennsylvania, but that wouldn't be enough to give Trump 270 electoral votes. So this would go to, well, go to the states, essentially. Justin Proto says, is this reporter admitting that Dems continually pull ballots out of suitcases in elections? Apparently so. Apparently so. In a sworn declaration, investigator for the Georgia Secretary of State's office punctures reports of an election night plumbing problem in Fulton County and addresses the video footage the president and his allies have been flogging. You know that burst pipe? There was no burst pipe. This is from at NYC Southpaw 6. My investigators have interviewed witnesses and security footage of State Farm Arena between November 3rd and 4th, 2020. Our investigators discovered that observers and media were not asked to leave. They simply left on their own when they saw one group of workers whose job was only to open envelopes and who had completed that task also leave. Our investigation review of the entire security footage revealed that there were no mystery ballots that were brought in from an unknown location and hidden under tables, as has been reported by some. Video taken hours before shows the table being brought into the room at 8:22 a.m. Nothing was underneath the table then. Someone from Monterey Peninsula College says, This doesn't even make sense. The ballots weren't hidden under a table for a nefarious purpose, but because the election staff were mistakenly told to go home, and that's how ballots are normally securely stored, by hiding them under a table. Unlike the election staff, the Republican observers who claimed they were told to go home really weren't. They just all spontaneously decided to leave on their own. If I lived in that state, I'd probably vote for Stacey Abrams over Kemp and Raffensperger. I have nothing in common with them. Well, at least me and Stacey agree about hating Georgia Republicans. Lynn Wood, who is involved in the fight against stealing the election, has made a very specific and damning allegation against the governor of Georgia, which, if true and proved, would mean that he has to go to jail. I'm not predicting that, but in this year, anything is possible. The site, which is in front of all of these stories, is the Gateway Pundit, so I'm going to look at some of them. This is from today by Jim Hoft. Ruby Freeman and daughter and election supervisor, I don't know whether this is Wandrea or Wandria, Shea, that's her nickname, Moss, with Ralph Jones, the voter registration chief in Fulton County. The three are suspects in the suitcase ballot fraud at the State Farm Center via Yakov Applebaum. Earlier on Thursday, Christina Lila reported on the explosive video that was revealed during the Georgia ballot counting at the State Farm Arena, where crooked Democrats pulled out suitcases full of ballots and began counting those ballots without election monitors in the room. Trump's legal team showed a video from the State Farm Tabulation Center when poll workers were told to leave at 10:25 p.m. A few workers stayed behind and were seen pulling suitcases full of ballots out from under tables to be tabulated. This was the most explosive video of the entire campaign season. We later identified one of the operatives on Thursday night who was caught on video counting illegal ballots from suitcase stashed under a table. One woman in the center was wearing a purple top. She later appeared in the suitcase video. Her name is Ruby Freeman, and her daughter, Wandrea Shea Moss, was later identified as her supervisor, who was helping cart out the hidden ballots in the suitcases to be counted after all of the GOP observers and media were sent home for a water main break. It was all a fraud. And here's a close-up of the woman in question via a Getty image. Her official name is Wandrea Moss. Following our report, Carolyn Ryan from Carolyn Ryan TV reached out to Ruby for an interview. At first, she accepted the invitation, but then declined. She said she needed a lawyer. Good idea. Carolyn posted her text messages with Ruby Freeman. She had texted, good morning, I had to turn my phone off. I've been receiving calls, texts, messenger, Facebook messages. I would love to be interviewed. Maybe this would stop. Then Ruby backed up. I won't be able to be interviewed. This is bigger than me. I need an attorney. Thanks. Much later, maybe later. Happy holidays. Much love to you and your team. Yep, it's probably best that Ruby gets herself a lawyer. Maybe the Biden campaign will pitch in and help. Of course, a question which has been asked again and again, the FBI spoken to this woman? The FBI spoken to her daughter? Has the FBI spoken to, what's his name, Thomas? Doesn't seem so. It could have happened. This is again from Joe Hoft today. Devices manufactured by a China-owned company are attached to Dominion machines. American modern-day Minutemen and women are saving our country. Hat tip to Roscoe Davis. It was reported through a tweet that a company owned by a Chinese firm is the manufacturer of modems used by Dominion with their voting machines. According to another internet hero, Edivis Selgo cellular modems are used by Dominion. The cost for the cellular modems is listed in an inventory of equipment needed for Calhoun County, Michigan. These machines and modems should never be used in U.S. elections. This is frightening. The devices allow an individual remotely to access, monitor, and perhaps manipulate the voting machines and data on a real-time basis. You may have heard that Dominion voting machines were secured by the Trump campaign, and they ran ballots through them, and they found something very interesting. that the ballots, this is in Michigan, were weighted, that the Trump ballots were weighted at something like a 0.73, whereas the Biden ballots were weighted at something like 1.27. So this accounts for the notorious vote shift from Trump to Biden. From Christina Lila, again, Arizona Republicans Monday called for the decertification of their state's false election results. Last week, rhino of all rhinos, Governor Doug Ducey, signed off on the certification of Arizona's false election results while Trump's legal team appeared before House and Senate members. Last week, Arizona Republican Representative Mark Fincham issued a call to withhold the state's electoral college votes for Joe Biden because, quote, he believes there is enough significant evidence of fraud to invalidate the state's votes, unquote. Fincham also blasted Doug Ducey. Oh, George Soros appoints Lord Mark Malloch Brown, the former president of Smartmatic, to lead the Open Society Foundation. Yes, it's just seditionists all the way down. Senator Ted Cruz pledges to argue Pennsylvania election case in Supreme Court if case accepted. Trump said today, the case has been made. You'll see a lot of big things happening over the next couple of days. Oh, and Governor Brian Kemp on video in front of communist flag asking Chinese companies to invest in Georgia. Elections director in Fulton County, Richard Barron, claims no one was told to leave Atlanta Arena election night, but affidavits say otherwise. Yes, of course they do. And here's an update. Attorney General Barr intends to stay as long as President Trump needs him. And finally, from Gateway Pundit, a YouTube link of today's voter fraud court hearing in Georgia is set to private after Sidney Powell promoted it. What the hell is going on? Of course, Trump had a rally in Valdosta, Georgia, where the crowd began chanting, "Fight for Trump," and they were not pleased with the governor, and they were not pleased with the Secretary of State. Well, to put it mildly, they didn't disqualify a single ballot. Michigan witness claims he also saw systemic voter fraud in Detroit. Expert identifies 200,000 votes hijacked from Trump to Biden in Georgia at the precinct level. Now, we're hearing a lot about this word evidence. And again, there are two types of evidence. There is common sense evidence and there is legal evidence. Whether there will be enough legal evidence to overturn the stolen election, I'm not so sure of. But ultimately, it's not going to come down to that. It's going to come down to the decision made by President Donald Trump. And he has given no indication whatsoever that he intends to leave the White House. But again, this Associated Press story that I was talking from is very much in the minority because, I'll just remind you, I was in the news media in my own country at a fairly high level. I was in the media for close to 20, well, more than 20 years, actually. And so, okay, here's the scenario. An election is held, and the President of the United States claims the election was stolen by his opponent. And this wasn't an offhand comment. This is repeated with details, with lawyers working for the president or just working for citizens, finding all this evidence of chicanery. And the attitude of the media is, this isn't a story. Well, of course it is a story. It's a huge story. I'm going to read from Vox Day's blog. President Trump answers a journalist. A week from now, the electors will meet to cast their vote. There's not a lot of time between now and then to make your case. Are you looking to change the outcome of the election or make the case to the American people that it wasn't fair? Trump replies, if you look at the polls, it was a rigged election. You look at the different states, the election was totally rigged. It's a disgrace to our country. It's like a third world country, and these ballots pouring in from everywhere and using machinery nobody knows, ownership nobody knows anything about. They have glitches, as they call them, glitches that are not glitches. They got caught sending out thousands of votes, all against me, by the way. This was like from a third world nation, and now we find out what we can do about it. But you'll see a lot of big things happening over the next couple of days. Stay cool, Vox Day writes, stand back and stand by. Meanwhile, the salient point sails high over CNN's collective head. There's a sense developing within Donald Trump's legal team and what remains of his campaign staff that their efforts to overturn or delay the results of the election are coming to an end. Multiple sources tell CNN, despite what the president has said publicly. Translation, the courts have had their chance. Sure, it's always possible that we have it wrong. On the other hand, it's going to be very easy to explain how no one saw it coming. Rita wrote to Vox Day wondering about the timing of any potential Rubicon crossing. Vox, do you believe that this whole process needs to be finished before December 14th when the electors meet and vote? If Joe Biden gets 270 electors but received electoral votes that are illegitimate, where would that lead the process? Does Donald Trump need to make his move and cross the Rubicon before they vote on December 14th? Vox Day responds, the very nature of the questions betrays a very different perspective than my own. My view, which may or may not be correct, is that President Trump is in full control of the situation and can choose to make his move at any time. And given my suspicions that he may be an elite strategist, I would expect him to do so after forcing everyone else to show their cards. Now, just as there were probably some Carthaginian officers who wanted to know why Hannibal didn't order his cavalry to attack the Roman flanks after driving off the Roman cavalry, and who panicked when the Carthaginian center was driven back, there have been people demanding to know why, if he was able, the God Emperor didn't take action in 2016, in 2018, or before November 3rd this year. But Hannibal knew, as I suspect Trump knows, that if you're going to successfully destroy an entire army, you have to look as if you're being defeated and be extraordinarily patient in order to convince the enemy to enter the trap in its entirety. And if President Trump manages to accomplish what it very much looks like he is planning to do, he will rank with Hannibal, Caesar, and Napoleon among the all-time historical greats. So in answer to the questions, no. This process does not need to be finished before December 14th. The election is not even potentially lost unless and until Joe Biden, or at this point, it would be more likely to be Kamala Harris, is sworn in on January the 20th. The process is all but irrelevant. The only thing the process will determine is who is standing by the Constitution and who is not. There are three paths to victory, and only the first two involve the process. And finally, no. In fact, he is unlikely to make any such move before then because he will want to see who has sold out and who has not. Let's go back to the chat. The thinning is beginning, says Brandon Smith. Halper says if all else fails, Trump can go full Kuomintang and set up a USG in exile and an island off the coast. Matthew Carpenter says, I don't believe the election fraud narrative, but if this is what it takes to delegitimize the system, then I'm on board. Anran says, how can one not believe something that is overwhelming and obvious? We'll go back to Scott Adams says, the deception by force, that you have to leave. The Republican poll watchers have to leave, and we are going to block the windows so you can't see what we're doing inside. To me, and I think to any reasonably minded person, this is prima facie and powerful evidence of massive election fraud. Brandon Smith, again, the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. Glib Medley says, never a good sign when Gateway Pundit is a primary source. I don't know about that. I suppose they're very conspiratorially minded, but who would not be on this day of December the 7th, 2020? I'll give you an example, which is not quite related, but actually it is. that a virus came out of China early this year, or perhaps late last year, and the medical establishment of the World Health Organization and, well, the United States of America and Canada, they all said it's not really much of a problem. Don't need to worry about it. Just be reasonable. In fact, the real problem is xenophobia and racism. And then people started dying. The people who were dying were almost exclusively in old age homes with initial average age of death of something like 87. And then, just like that, the experts turned on a dime and said, you're all going to die. The world is coming to an end. We need social distancing of 2 meters or 7 feet. Everyone has to wear masks. Oh, now even outdoors in some places, we are shutting down society completely and ruining the economy. And guess what? It's too dangerous to vote in person, so you'll have to vote by mail. How about that? It all happened. Very good point from Yo Mama. Pearl Harbor Day is a day for surprises, although Roosevelt knew exactly what was happening. He had wanted a war for years, and he finally got one. A lot of innocent people had to die in Hawaii, and 2 senior military men who were, not Kimmel and the other fellow, who were not responsible for this, well, they got cashiered, didn't they? With winter upon us, are the restaurants going to take down the shanties, or will they add insulation and burn barrels? I'm curious about that, because I've read and I've seen pictures that in New York City and perhaps other places, they are building onto the streets. They are building walled enclosures. But that's not indoors. No. It's not indoors because indoor dining is prohibited. Yeah. Again, General Short. Thank you, Emmett Kelly's Earth. Admiral Kimmel and General Short. Yeah. Did anyone see that happening? Good. Okay, so the governor of New York is going to say that indoor dining is banned. Oh, but then restaurants will start literally building structures in the street, but that doesn't count as indoors. Steve says, before the war, Roosevelt once gave a radio speech which he claimed absurdly the Nazis had a secret plan to take over Latin America and abolish Christianity. They had a tough enough time taking over Europe, as it turned out, and failed roughly at the Ural Mountains. Jokerkin 66, Hannibal was black, y'all. Yeah, I suppose so. Probably closer to a Berber, what they call now. But if the blacks want to claim him, if you want to ally yourself with Carthage, one of the cruelest and craziest civilizations ever. He was a great general, though. No question about that. And more hilarious and unbelievable news about election 2020, or just the year 2020. I'm going to have to turn up the light here. Marilyn. It's an exceptionally gloomy day here, with the halogen streetlights reflecting the wet streets and parking lots, and the hissing of cars, which can be heard from quite a distance. A lot of traffic in this area. This is from the Detroit News. A security group that questions Michigan's presidential results and is listed in at least one of the lawsuits challenging Michigan's election results is reviewing tabulators and other election materials in Antrim County. Allied Securities Operation Group and Village of Central Lake resident William Bailey will take forensic images of the county's 22 tabulators and review other election-related material following a Friday court order allowing for the review. Yes, paper ballots, people. We've had this since November 3rd, this scramble for hard drives, a scramble for tabulation machines, with the government of Michigan saying, destroy the evidence, destroy the evidence. This has actually happened. You've got to wipe out all those votes. Why? Why do you have to wipe out the votes? Well, I suppose they might be counted again, or the ballots might be run through the machines again, and God knows what might happen then. Poll, dead heat in Georgia Senate runoffs. These Republicans, Perdue and Loeffler, they are not impressive. On the other hand, the Democrats, John Ossoff is a standard Democratic creep, whereas the Reverend Raphael Warnock is batshit crazy. So that's the choice for Georgians. Let's look at the Citizen Free Press here. Okay, Sidney Powell, Kraken lawsuit dismissed in federal court by an Obama appointee. It's not really a surprise, is it? Batten did not rule on the merits of Powell's claim, which were made on behalf of a slate of would-be Trump electors in the Electoral College. Instead, the judge granted motions to dismiss the lawsuit on the grounds that the suit did not belong in federal court. The Discovery Channel is producing a show. This is from the National Pulse. The day I ran China under the instruction and supervision of the Chinese Communist Party, pushing party talking points and promoting tech firms banned by various U.S. federal agencies. Wow. Biden government is going to be the most Chinese-friendly ever, is it not? I read that apparently Joe Biden himself has pecuniary connections to communist China. From Reason Magazine, Robbie Soav, the Chicago Teachers Union, which represents more than 28,000 educators, in the nation's third largest city, tweeted on Sunday, the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. Okay, sure. I'll tell you what, since the push to open schools is rooted in, well, evil, let's close down the schools and fire all the teachers and administrators. That's a fair deal, isn't it? I think so. Okay, what do we have coming up now? As I said earlier, you might notice or complain that the stories that I'm speaking of, they tend to come from the same sources, and there's a reason for that, as I explained earlier, which is that the mainstream media is simply not covering this story, which is, potentially the story of the century. But no, Joe Biden won. Joe Biden won. He's the president-elect, and he occupies the office of the president-elect, which apparently is a virtual office. Does it have headquarters? Does it have an official seal? Okay. From The Federalist, USA Today is now using college kids to censor media they dislike. Well, of course. Of course they are. It's good that the kids are getting some work out of this. Molly Hemingway at The Federalist writes, a big tech-backed fact-checking outfit claimed to debunk explosive evidence in support of Republicans' claims of significant election problems at a Thursday Georgia Senate hearing. It didn't, not even close. Newly discovered security footage from Georgia's State Farm Arena showed dozens of ballot counters, media, and Republican observers leaving en masse at the same time from the ballot counting area for Fulton County. After they left, a small remnant of about 4 workers began pulling trunks containing thousands of ballots from underneath a table with a long tablecloth and running them through machines. The footage supported claims from Republicans that they were told counting had stopped for the night, only to find out hours later that it had kept going on. You can and should watch the 12-minute portion of testimony from Jackie Pick here. On Friday morning, a group called Lead Stories published a hoax alert, falsely claiming to have bunked the security video. The Washington Post, Newsweek, and other outlets followed along, criticizing non-leftist journalists for giving the video traction. In fact, none of the claims made by the Republicans were debunked. I should mention to you that the Washington Post has been a CIA asset since the 1950s. You can look up Operation Mockingbird. Newsweek is no longer owned by the Washington Post, but it was for many years, so presumably it was a CIA asset as well. Lead Stories fact-checked, said government officials told them everything was fine with the counting, that the ballots were in, well, actually, the ballots were in containers, not suitcases. There's a world of difference between them. What is a suitcase if not a container? And that party officials were never told to leave because counting was over for the night. Leaving aside whether relying solely and uncritically on government officials' claims constitutes anything close to a fact check, well, that's all the Washington Post and the New York Times does is slightly rewrite government press releases. Well, not from the Trump administration, but you understand. Let's look at the claim that party observers were never told the counting was over for the night. Lead Stories' regurgitation of government officials' claims. Only the people who cut open the absentee ballot envelopes were sent home, while ballot counters and scanners were retained and kept working, and no one told the press or other observers they were done counting. Were Republican poll watchers and the media told counting had stopped for the night? Georgia Republican Party Chairman David Schaefer has consistently said that's what happened at State Farm Arena beginning hours after the election. Tweet of 2 p.m. November 4th, Fulton County told our observers last night to go home because they were closing up, and then continued to count ballots in secret. That claim, which he has repeated consistently, is backed by sworn affidavits from 2 Republican observers who further allege that they were kept at an unreasonable distance from the ballots, even when they were at State Farm Arena, making it completely impossible to meaningfully do their job. The video, which shows the room from 4 different angles, fully supports the claim that poll watchers were kept away from meaningful observation of ballot handling. The observers say they arrived for their observation jobs around 8 p.m. They say in the first half of the 10 o'clock hour, a woman with blonde braids, and I believe that woman is called Wandrea, who appeared to be a supervisor, yelled out to those present in the room that they should stop working for the night and would resume in the morning. The Republican poll watchers said they asked Fulton County election spokesperson Regina Waller questions about the nature of the ballot count multiple times, but that she refused to answer. You know, I suppose one depends on a certain amount of good faith in questions of this sort, and everything that we have got from the Democrats, from the media, from the conservatives in the Republican Party is the exact opposite of that. What does Scott Adams have to say? Politics aside, Pelosi is a horrible human being. Okay. Let's see. Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, says Barnes and Barris preview Georgia and anomalies. What are the odds? Oh, this is a video. So, well, we know what the odds are. When the same thing happens at the same time and all the anomalies, every single one of them goes